Saturday evening, President Trump tweeted about Hurricane Florence, now Tropical Depression Florence, saying 5 deaths have been recorded thus far with regards to the hurricane. He said deepest sympathies and warmth go out to the families and friends of the victims. May God be with him. He said there 5 people had died, but at the time, CNN and Fox and the AP were all already reporting that the death toll stood at least 11. Now, the latest reporting by CNN is that the death toll is up to 13. And unfortunately, that death toll will likely rise. This is just one of thousands of examples of the president getting it wrong. Right there again, saying 5 deaths have been recorded. This is his government doing the recording of the deaths. There's no word on where Trump got that number or why he added an exclamation point. There's been no correction or update yet. But here's the point. If the White House can't get the small stuff right, it makes you worry about the big stuff. And honestly, I think you should be worried because the president continues to spread conspiracy theories, even about hurricanes. Now, he does this to evade responsibility, to deflect blame, and to keep his fans fired up. But we in the press corps have to keep calling it out. We can't get immune to this. Obviously, his worst theory this week was about Puerto Rico, suggesting the death toll in the wake of Hurricane Maria was inflated by Democrats to make him look bad. Death toll denialism. I really never thought I'd see the day. While news outlets tried to explain where that 2,975 total came from, about how the study was conducted, Trump did find support, as always, from his media enablers.
The numbers were inflated, and the president was right to call out the organizations who threw out science, statistics, and evidence to discredit the Trump administration.
Okay, Lou. All right, look, Trump world embraces conspiracy theories because the truth is not on the president's side. Puerto Rico is just the most recent example. We all know how the president routinely attacks the Robert Mueller probe as an illegal witch hunt, even just an hour ago, even in the wake of Paul Manafort's guilty plea. The evidence that this is a legal probe is overwhelming, but the conspiracy theory that it's a witch hunt makes the president feel good. And that's not the only one. Let's keep going through the list. The idea of a deep state, that is a conspiracy theory. So is the idea that the fake news colludes and works together to take him down. All of these are really sinister conspiracy theories. And of course, the one that always stands out in my mind is the illegal voting theory, the idea that millions of people voted illegally in 2016, robbing Trump of the popular vote. This is actually one of the only common threads of the Trump presidency, his embrace of conspiracy theories. And I understand it can feel good to believe in some fantasy, to believe that there are external forces that are out to get you rather than facing reality. But this is reliable sources, so let's face reality with Brendan Nyhan. He's a professor of public policy at the University of Michigan who studies this for a living. And Amanda Carpenter is also here, a CNN political commentator and the author of a book all about this titled Gaslighting America. Brendan, normally conspiracy theories are about the people in power, right? It's not about the person in power spreading these lies.
That's what's so remarkable about it, Brian. Donald Trump has become the conspiracy theorist in chief. He's in the most powerful office in the world, and he's promoting conspiracy theories. They usually are used by the powerless and directed against the powerful, but instead he's weaponizing them from the highest office in the land and leveraging the intense partisanship of American politics to do it. It's a dangerous combination, and it's not one we've seen in contemporary American politics before. It's much more like countries we see abroad, where authoritarian leaders use conspiracy theories to avoid accountability for their actions. And I think that's a worrisome comparison. As I often say on Twitter, what would you say if you saw this in another country? The comparisons that come to mind are not our fellow Democratic leaders. And
so what would you
that
say,
underscores
Brendan?
how unusual he is.
Let's go there. What would you say if a man in another country, another man in power in another country, suggested the death toll from a hurricane wasn't what we all believe it was?
Well, at some point, it becomes a kind of assault on our shared understanding of reality. And that's what we've seen in other countries where misinformation and conspiracy theories are weaponized by the governing regime. That's not a road we should be comfortable going down. It's not one we should pretend is normal political dishonesty. Every politician dissembles, every politician makes false statements. But this is something different entirely, and it's about real people's lives. Those people in Puerto Rico, what happened to them is real. We sometimes act like what's on Twitter is a reality show, but Donald Trump is trying to evade accountability for something that upset the lives of thousands of our fellow citizens and maybe even is responsible for the deaths of thousands of our fellow citizens. That is deadly serious.
And by pushing this, Amanda, he's obviously stoking resentment of Democrats or of the media or of researchers or of scientists. What was your reaction to this ongoing messaging that he's coming out with about Puerto Rico?
Well, to me, it's nothing new because floating these conspiracy theories is really a way for him to deflect responsibility. And if you look at some of the defining narratives of his presidency, which is why I think Brendan is right to call him the conspiracy theorist in chief, three things really come to mind. That's the deep state, the rigged election, and fake news. And what makes this sort of awkward is that we expect Donald Trump as president of the United States to be a defender of major institutions. And yet we have a president who is floating these theories that get at to the credibility of these institutions. And so he continues to stoke this us versus them mentality, even while we look to him to protect these major things that we look towards. And so that's what makes this really awkward. And the thing that moves us into a dangerous realm is that when the president of the United States does this, is that political conspiracies can be more dangerous because at some point, if you think there's big, terrible things happening, people want to take action. And that may be something more than voting.
Yeah, and there's been this uptick in his conspiratorial thinking over time. I want to show an example of how this stuff can do real harm. In this case, to Trump's party. This is a real example from today's New York Times, and it's a really interesting result of a study from a pro-Trump PAC. It says here that conservative-leaning voters in the study routinely dismissed the possibility of a Democratic wave election, a blue wave, with some describing the prospect as fake news. So that's what the research found. Axios has actually found something very similar and reported on something very similar in recent weeks. The idea here, Brendan, is that the president's calling the polls fake. He's saying the blue wave is not real. And so as a result, his voters will not show up at the polls, and it could actually depress the voter turnout. What do you make of that?
It's a remarkable turn of events. He's become the boy who cried wolf. He's delegitimized all other sources of information to his supporters, and as a result, they're not believing what is in their political self-interest to believe. Now, that's a kind of ironic event, but I think we should worry about the implications of this when the stakes become more serious, when it's not just about which party wins in elections, but it's about matters of even life or death. Right? The president's now going to be able to send emergency alerts to every American cell phone. What if they don't believe what's sent to them? What if they don't believe authorities when they tell them to evacuate in the face of an oncoming hurricane, for instance?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. So this is a test of the FEMA wireless alert system that's coming up on Thursday. Totally normal. Any government would do it. This is not a Trump thing. However, because it's going to be labeled presidential alert and only 32% of Americans trust the president, I'm worried about the lack of credibility and how this is a real world example of how lack of credibility affects the government.
That's right. That's right. Imagine there was a crisis with North Korea right now. I don't think the president could speak credibly to all Americans. They might have to send General Mattis or someone else out to speak on behalf of the government precisely so that people would accept the information that's being provided.